For those of you I haven't met, my name is David Saul. I'm the chief scientist at State Street, and in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to attempt to tell you about some solutions, a combination of technology and standards activity to address some of the data problem that we all have. And it really starts with asking yourself a very simple question. Do you know where your data is? And if your answer is, well, it's somewhere in the IT department on disks, I think, that's probably not a very good answer. What I'm really trying to get at here, and I'll expand on this with some other questions, is do you really know where the data that's important to the running of your business is? Do you know who has responsibility for that? And most importantly, do you know what that data means, and can you use it effectively? So I'm going to start with 4 questions that expand on that point. I'll talk a bit about semantic technology, which is actually not new. It's celebrating its 10th year, but a number of factors are coming together, making it more mature and accessible. I'll talk about current status and some of the standards activities that are going on. And then I'll end up with some things that you can actually do when you go back to your own organization. So I said there'll be 4 do you know questions. You've already heard the first one, which is, do you know where your data is? And that really expands into the data that you use in order to run your business, whatever it happens to be, whether it's financial services or any other. Are you able to access that data in a meaningful way? Do you have ownership? So really what we're talking about here is a data governance program for all of your data. And of these questions, the most important one is, are you getting the greatest value out of the data that you already have or that you have access to? And most people I talk to have the feeling that they are not, and that if they were able to do that, they would achieve improvements in profitability, productivity, quality, and lower their risk. Second question is, we're all in a regulated industry. Do you know what regulations apply to your data in particular? And do you track them on a regular basis? And are you able to handle unusual situations and times of stress? The third question is, of the various vendors that provide support to your data, are they really doing a good job? Or do you have a bunch of point solutions that don't integrate very well, or possibly some solutions that you're partially not using or just sitting on the shelf? And by this I mean not just hardware and software vendors, but also professional services and consultants. And then the last one are you aware of what standards can do to help you in the data space, and do you participate in standards activities? Right, so what is semantic data? Semantic data, the concept of semantics was first proposed exactly 10 years ago, and it came out of actually the same author who came up with the idea of the World Wide Web, which is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. And Tim Berners-Lee, who's now at MIT, said, well, what we're able to do with the World Wide Web is we're able to go from one location to another location by linking, and those 2 locations have not communicated with one another. They haven't, in a lot of cases, they're not even aware of the existence of the other one. But because we have a standardized way of addressing, we're able to navigate around the World Wide Web. Building on that, he said, what if we could do the same thing with data? If we had a representation of some data that resided in one place and in another, and not even necessarily in the same technology, one might be in a database, another in a spreadsheet, yet another in an unstructured document, but they were representing the same thing. And the simplest example is the name of a company, a legal entity. So in one place, I might have it stored as IBM. Another place, I have it as International Business Machines Corporation. And yet another, I might have a code that represents IBM. The semantic web links all of those together in the same way that we're able to link locations and say all of those things are the same. They're the representation of a legal entity, the name of a company. And a very simple way of thinking of that is you have the data itself and the meaning that's associated with that data. And if that meaning traveled with the data wherever it went, think about what you'd be able to do. You would be able to integrate data much more simply without having to create transformational programs or have people do that interpretation. As I say, this semantic technology started out as an idea and is now getting to the point where it's being implemented. And it builds on a lot of the work that's been going on for even longer than that. Creation of data dictionaries is an early form of semantics, of mapping the meaning of data. In addition to the meaning, we have data. We need to understand the data in context and its relationship to other data. So going back to my example again, IBM isn't a single entity. It's made up of lots of different divisions and subsidiaries, and it also has other relationships. So in addition to mapping the parent organization, we want to understand all of those relationships because occasionally we might want to aggregate that data for analytic or risk management purposes. And the term that's applied to this combination of meaning plus relationship, which tells you everything you really need to know about the data, is called an ontology. And I think the easiest way to think about semantics and how it might replace some traditional kinds of applications is very often we have the need to take data from different places, from transactional systems, operational data stores, comes in from external sites, and we put it all together in a data warehouse. And the typical data warehouse project requires us to map the data from the form it's into a representation within the data warehouse. And often there are a series of ETL jobs which extract the data, transform it, and then load it into the data warehouse. This is a relatively slow process, doesn't lend itself very well to ad hoc types of queries where you don't know necessarily in advance what the data sources you're going to pull from. In semantics, a lot of the time we're able to leave the data where it was originally and just pull those meanings together and create those ad hoc queries. So semantics is very powerful technology. If each of us had to create our own, that would certainly be a lot of work, but it wouldn't facilitate exchanging that across organizations. So if you now take semantics and add standards to it so that when we're describing, say, IBM, it's the same way everybody else is describing it, it becomes that much more powerful. Where are we today? Well, there's been a lot of work on taxonomies that is a natural lead-in and a prerequisite for building these various ontologies. So I've got a bit of alphabet soup of some of the both standards activities and semantic work that's already taken place. And on my next slide, I'm going to talk about a very specific example for the financial industry. I don't know how many people have heard of FIBO, or the Financial Industry Business Ontology. This is a cooperative effort of financial institutions with the support of regulatory agencies and a standardization process from an internationally known standards organization, the Object Management Group. And the short-term objective on FIBO is to deal with the regulatory reporting that's required under Dodd-Frank for over-the-counter derivatives. So in the Dodd-Frank legislation, and the regulators have to come up with regulations to support this, institutions like ours and others that deal with OTC derivatives have to report back to the U.S. government, specifically the agency, the CFTC, that's been given responsibility under Dodd-Frank to do this. They don't really know how to write the regulation because they don't know how to ask for that information in a standardized way. So short of asking for all of the OTC derivative transactions from us and everybody else, they would now have that and have to put it to, if it was not standardized across all of those entities, there would be no way to put that information together and integrate it. So for the past 3+ years, the EDM Council, I know you have a question, I just want to finish this. The past 3+ years, the EDM Council has been creating that standard, and they've been using semantic technology in order to describe the entities within a derivative transaction. So you take a credit default swap, you need to describe the different kinds of collateral that are associated with it, and there are multiple different kinds. What FIBO does is describe those in a consistent way. And this is being proposed to the regulators as an industry standard method in order to do that. And the way in which the standard has been developed, as I said, it's built on semantic technology, but the definitions of things like collateral are being done by business people who understand what that is. I don't claim to understand it myself. So FIBO, the first pieces of FIBO, which are the underlying definitions plus the derivatives transactions themselves, have been described. The intention for FIBO, and this is going to take a period of time, is to extend that to describe all other transactions, financial transactions that take place. And so the EDM Council and OMG have a roadmap over the next several years to move that to everything from corporate actions to mortgages and everything in between. There's another piece of standards work that I want to describe that's newer, but again is being done in an open manner, and that is to represent the processes that feed into this data. So FIBO is a pure data representation. You also, in order to fully describe what the operations that go on, you need to have the processes that make changes to that data, move it around, transform it, and so on. So ACTUS, you probably can't read this, stands for the Algorithm Contract Type Unified Shortcuts. It's a mouthful. Very simply, it's meant to represent mathematically a transaction. And so by taking the data representations from something like FIBO, you see examples up there. Actually, and ACTUS is also a work in progress. So the one that they've started with is a relatively simple form of transaction, which is an interest rate swap. And take that data represented in ACTUS. The ACTUS model shows things like the time value of the asset as it changes with interest rate changes or redemptions, and all of those are represented. And the idea here is to bring together that data piece and the process piece. And so there are, we're talking now in real time. A number of proof of concepts are kicking off using real data to demonstrate that this actually works. All right, well, the important thing is what benefit do we get out of this? And who benefits and what is it that they get? And the institutions like ours and anyone else who's participating in the financial system has the potential for lowering the cost for our regulatory reporting, because now we're only delivering what targeted what we need to in order to satisfy the regulatory requirement, as opposed to delivering more information or delivering the same information to different regulators in different forms. That's not a productive use. The other benefit is to get the people who are actually using this to participate in the development of the standards. So we often complain that the regulators don't really understand our business, and they write regulations that, while they think they're doing their job of lowering risk, really don't, because they don't have that understanding. Now we have an industry-driven effort to create those standards and feed that back to the regulators. So if we think of the financial system and the various constituencies, so we at the top we have companies like ourselves and traditional banks, insurance companies. I mean, anyone who is participating in investments in any form. On the right-hand side, we have the regulators, and we've already talked about the issue that they have of integrating all of this information. Sometimes I find it hard to generate sympathy for regulators, but they really do have an extremely difficult job. On the left-hand side, we have the various providers that we all depend on, that build the hardware, write the software, come in and help us with best practices. The more clear the requirements are for what we need, the better products we're going to get from those providers. And then the standards organizations sometimes compete with one another. This makes it very clear what standards we want to have on a national and an international basis. At the center of it is trust. By increasing the standardization, by having more transparency in this system, which is exactly what this combination of standards and semantic technology does, not only do all four of those constituencies benefit, but the general investing public is going to have an increased level of trust in the system, which means they're going to invest more, which helps the global environment. So very quickly here, I'm not going to go through, the copy of this presentation will be available, are a list of some of the benefits that come to all four of those groups by the use of semantic technology combined with standards. The last slide here is, all right, you're looking at this and you might want to find out more information. All of the work, FIBO is free. There's no charge to use FIBO. The documentation is freely available. The language that it's described in is an open source language. So one of the key things to encourage the use of standards is to make them freely available. So you're going back to your home organization. Here are 4 things that you could ask yourself. I mean, and if you can answer all 4 of these, then you're in better shape than most people. But do you know where your data is? Do you have a robust data discovery and governance program within your organization? Do you have all of the regulations that apply to data stored in one place where they're accessible and they're spread throughout the organization? Do you keep up with changes in the regulations? Have you taken a look in the data space of all of the vendors that you currently deal with, and are they satisfying all of your requirements? And if not, are you telling them? And then the last one is, these standards organizations are volunteer groups. I mean, they have a permanent staff, but the input to the standards, the development of them, is all done by the membership, which means it's only as good as the people who work on it. And are you participating? And it doesn't have to be FIBO. There are a number of others that are going on, and representing your view of it and your knowledge and expertise.